I'm Captain Elena Vincent, 30 years old, a cybersecurity officer in the United States Army. The night my parents called, they didn't issue concern. They issued a command. Cancel the engagement. He's not worthy of our family. But worth is something I've spent my whole life defining. Would you have obeyed? At 09:30 hours that Monday, I was finishing a readiness report in the ops office when my cell buzzed across the metal desk. I almost let it go to voicemail. Calls from home rarely carried good intel, but the caller ID read Mom. "Sweetheart," she began, her tone clipped and efficient. "Your father and I spoke last night. We've decided to cancel the engagement party." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her over the steady hum of servers in the next room. "Cancel?" I asked. "It just isn't appropriate, darling. We can't host something that would embarrass the family." Embarrass. The word landed like a round through thin sheet metal. Quiet entry, big exit. Around me, keyboards clicked, coffee machines hissed, and the smell of burnt grounds hung in the air. I swallowed once. Steady. Protocol. Absorb. Assess. Respond. "May I ask what's embarrassing about it?" "Ma'am?" Even off duty, the title slipped out when I needed distance. Her answer came crisp and cold. "Elena, be reasonable. You've chosen a man who fixes networks. Your father's associates won't understand how that fits our circle. It just isn't worthy." I looked down at my desk. Orders awaiting signature. 3 leave requests from soldiers who'd booked flights to attend. Invitations had gone out weeks ago. Venue deposit cleared. RSVPs stacked neat in a shared folder. Everything documented. Receipts for a mission now classified as aborted by hire. "Understood," I said finally. 2 syllables, flat as a status report. But inside, the briefing room of my mind was already spinning up. Sitrep. Primary sponsors have withdrawn support based on non-merit criteria. Assessment. Emotional ambush in civilian terrain. COA. Hold fire. Gather intel. Confirm motives. She kept talking. Something about how Dad's partners expected a certain standard, how optics mattered. Her voice blurred into background noise like static on a secure line. When the call ended with a cheerful, "Love you, darling," I was already reviewing damage control. Across the room, Sergeant Morales glanced up from his monitor. "You good, ma'am?" "Family call," I said. "Mission status, complicated." He grinned sympathetically, then returned to his code. Out here, worth was measured in competence and covering each other's 6, not in last names or guest lists. I logged the incident mentally, then opened a blank note titled, "OP Family Friction." Under key events, I typed one line. "Engagement party canceled. Reason, fiancé deemed unworthy. Facts only. No adjectives." The sting came later on the drive home. Windshield wipers beat slow, rhythmic like a metronome for containment. I forced my breathing into combat rhythm. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Anger and grief are chemicals. Control the dose or they'll cloud judgment. By the time I walked into our apartment, the decision was made. No emotional engagement until I had facts. In the Army, we don't react to provocation without a full intel picture. Family would get the same discipline as any hostile actor. Still, one sentence echoed. Not worthy of the family. Worthy according to what metric? Net worth? Title? Venue? I looked at the name tape on my uniform hanging by the door. Reeves, stitched in olive drab. Worth to me was earned one mission at a time. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my planner, and wrote a single word across tomorrow's date. Assess. Because if there's one thing the Army teaches you, it's that every order, especially a bad one, deserves a second look before execution. The next 48 hours felt like serving 2 chains of command, one governed by duty, the other by blood. At 0500, the alarm cut through the dark like a drill sergeant's whistle. I didn't hit snooze. Soldiers don't negotiate with the clock. The air outside was knife cold, mist coiling off the asphalt as I started my run. Each breath burned, but pain has a purpose. It strips away everything unnecessary. Step by step, the noise of my mother's voice faded into cadence. Embarrassment, worthy, family image. Each word dissolved into the rhythm of my stride. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Controlled breathing, same as on the range. You don't outrun humiliation, you metabolize it. Back in the apartment, steam fogged the bathroom mirror. I wiped a small circle clear, locking eyes with the woman staring back. No pity, no fury. Just the look you give yourself before walking into a briefing room where everyone underestimates you. Uniform pressed, boots polished, name tape aligned. Reeves. Every crease, every brass pin, every regulation strand in place. It wasn't vanity. It was armor. At the office, Sergeant Morales glanced up as I walked in. "Morning, ma'am. You look ready to take a hill." "Not today, Morales," I said quietly. "Today we just hold the line." He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. In this unit, we all knew that sometimes the hardest battles happened off the books. Midday, a message blinked onto my personal phone, from my sister Clara. The text was short. "Mom says you're being dramatic. If you need help explaining things to Dad's colleagues, I can step in. You don't want to look ungrateful." Ungrateful. Dramatic. Two words civilians weaponize when they run out of logic. I stared at the screen, then turned it face down. No reply. In comms protocol, silence isn't weakness. It's control. That evening, David, my fiancé, found me sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, sorting through RSVPs like evidence. "They called it off?" he asked softly. "Command decision," I said. "Mission canceled due to optics." He exhaled slowly, crouching beside me. "Elena, we can reschedule. Different place, smaller thing. That's not the point." I cut in. "They didn't cancel the party. They canceled you." He nodded once. No protest, no wounded pride, just quiet understanding. That's what I loved about him. No need to explain rank or hierarchy. He respected both, but bowed to neither. I reached for a pen and drew a thin line down a blank notepad. Left column family, right column facts. Under family, I listed the assumptions: appearances, status, legacy. Under facts, integrity, service record, loyalty. By the end of it, one side looked like theater, the other like substance. The next morning, as I reviewed a threat assessment brief, Morales slid a cup of coffee onto my desk. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always." "You've been staring through that monitor for 10 minutes. What's the play?" "Still gathering intel," I said. "No counteraction until we confirm enemy intent." He grinned. "Roger that." In truth, I already had intent confirmation. My family's campaign wasn't about logistics, it was about control. They couldn't command me in uniform, so they tried in civilian life, through etiquette, expectation, and emotional leverage. That night, the plan started forming. Not vengeance, just order. If the Army taught me anything, it's that chaos is a vacuum waiting for command. I pulled the whiteboard from the closet, flipped the cap off a dry erase marker. Header: Operation Family Friction. Objective: maintain dignity under civilian fire. Rules of engagement: no retaliation, facts only. Intel gaps: motives, alliances, financial pressure points. COA options: 1. Ignore. 2. Engage with data. 3. Redefine battlefield. I stared at the list until my reflection appeared faintly on the glossy surface, uniform lines still crisp even under apartment light. Clara's words replayed in my head. "You don't want to look ungrateful." Maybe not. But gratitude shouldn't be weaponized into obedience. In my world, respect flows up and down the chain. Earned, never demanded. I capped the marker. Mission clock started now. By Wednesday, I stopped waiting for diplomacy to work. In the field, when supply lines get cut, you don't sit around begging for rations. You find another way to feed your unit. That evening, David came home balancing 2 paper cups of coffee and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Got a lead," he said, setting 1 cup beside my laptop. "Remember Sergeant Carter from my reserve days? He texted me about a place. Veteran-owned brewery just outside the Beltway. Says it's rough around the edges, but the owner's solid." I closed the folder I'd been reviewing and met his gaze. "A place for real people?" He nodded. Not marble floors, more concrete and pride. We didn't call ahead. In operations, recon works best without an announcement. The drive took 40 minutes. City lights thinning into low warehouses and chain-link fences. The building looked like it had seen better decades, but an American flag hung clean and centered above the entrance, edges catching the wind. Inside, the air smelled of hops, wood polish, and old stories. The walls were a museum of service, unit patches, photographs, folded flags behind glass. Conversations hummed at low volume. Every voice carried the calm weight of people who'd seen harder days. Behind the bar stood a man built like a bunker. Late 50s, close-cropped gray hair, forearms corded with muscle and faded ink. He was polishing a pint glass with the precision of someone who still inspected gear before stowing it. David gave me a small nod, letting me take point. "Evening," I said, stepping up. "We were hoping to speak to the owner about hosting an event." The man didn't stop wiping the glass. "You're talking to him." His eyes flicked to my posture, then to the pin on my jacket. "Army?" "Yes, sir. Cyber ops." He grunted approval. "What kind of event?" "Engagement party," I said. "Nothing fancy, just good people, good food, and a reason to raise a glass." The rag froze mid-polish. "You sure you're in the right zip code? We don't do chandeliers." "Don't need them," I replied. "We've had enough of those." He studied me a long moment, eyes narrowing like he was reading between my ribbons. "Let me guess. Someone told you it wasn't suitable." I almost smiled. "Something like that." He set the glass down and leaned forward, elbows on the bar. "Name's Mike. Gunnery Sergeant, retired. We keep it simple here. Beer, barbecue, and respect. You bring folks who live by that, you've got a room." I extended my hand. His grip was iron, brief but genuine. "Thank you, Gunny," I said. "That's all we need." "No charge for deposit," he said gruffly. "Call it professional courtesy." I blinked. "We'll pay full rate." "Ma'am," he said, straightening. "Around here, we don't charge brothers and sisters for a seat at the table. Just don't waste it." His words landed heavier than any formal approval letter. In the world my parents ruled, worth was measured by who invited you in. Here, it was assumed, until you broke trust. Back at home, I pinned the receipt to our fridge door, marker scrawled with Salty Dog Brewery. Reservation confirmed. David poured 2 glasses of water. Slid one toward me. "You think this will work?" "It's not about working," I said. "It's about standing somewhere real." I pulled the whiteboard closer, updated the mission log. New AO, veteran-owned venue, secured via handshake. Allied assets, Gunny Mike, owner, staff, former service. Morale level, stabilizing. Below that, I added a new line under objectives. Redefine battlefield. Fight on terrain where respect is standard issue. When I capped the marker, David gave me a faint, proud smile. "You're building an operation out of a wedding." "Negative," I said. "Just applying chain of command to chaos." The next morning, I felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because I'd picked the ground to stand on. In combat and in life, that's half the battle won. By Friday morning, I'd shifted from reaction to reconnaissance. The situation had stabilized, emotionally at least. But any soldier knows stability is only the calm before a new variable enters the field. Mine arrived in the form of a manila folder and a late-night conversation that would redraw the entire operational map. It started quietly. David was still at his desk when I came in from base, jacket over my arm, fatigue in my shoulders. His screens glowed with scrolling code, but his expression wasn't the focused calm I was used to. It was tension, contained but visible. "Everything all right?" I asked, setting my keys down. He hesitated, then turned the monitor toward me. "There's something I need to show you. You can't repeat it outside this room." The phrasing alone told me it wasn't personal. It was operational. He opened a secured drive and entered a long passphrase. The interface that appeared wasn't standard. Minimalist, with compartmentalized panels marked Legal, Finance, Risk Assessment. A small logo in the corner read, Helix Defense Systems. "Helix?" I asked quietly. "The DHS subcontractor?" He nodded. "They're acquiring our firm, full integration. The announcement's embargoed for another week, but it's signed." I leaned closer, scanning figures that made my pulse slow into mission mode. Numbers like these weren't small. Contracts spanning critical infrastructure security, high-side encryption, multi-year sustainment budgets. This wasn't just a promotion. It was entry into a different stratosphere. "They're requiring one final independent audit before closing," he continued. "Data integrity, compliance with NIST controls, encryption chain, standard protocol. Who's handling it?" "They are. That's the problem." His tone lowered. "Their chosen assessor has prior ties to one of the venture groups that's been hostile to our design. If they flag something, even a false positive, it could delay or derail the close. I can't influence the audit, and I won't." I studied him. "You want me to run a countercheck?" "I want you to simulate what a real red team would find," he said evenly. "Strictly within ROE. You tell me where the weak points are before someone weaponizes them." I considered the request. Conflict of interest alarms flared instinctively, but he wasn't asking for cover-up. He wanted transparency before outsiders exploited a crack. "Scope?" I asked. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, documentation of his authorization, signed by Helix's interim compliance officer, granting him rights to engage an internal security consultant. Me. "Scope confirmed," I said. "ROE accepted." For the next 4 hours, our apartment transformed into a forward operating base. Laptops, printouts, and a pot of black coffee replaced weapons and comms gear. David handled architecture explanations. I handled adversary simulation, penetration testing, encryption key review, log validation. Every time a vulnerability surfaced, he patched and documented it. Every finding was logged, time-stamped, and closed. No shortcuts, no gray zones. At 0200, I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. "System integrity solid, audit ready." He smiled faintly. "You sure?" "Run your checks, verify my work. If they're competent, they'll find nothing I didn't flag." When you're in uniform long enough, you learn to respect process. Even if your motives are pure, results without documentation are just claims. So before dawn, I exported the full findings report, hashed it, and sealed it in an encrypted archive with dual signatures. David watched me upload it to his secure repository. "You really do everything by the book." "Books keep people alive," I said. "Or in your case, companies." The next evening, over takeout and dim lamplight, I saw the first genuine ease in his posture since the call from my mother. He lifted a glass of water, toasting lightly. "To proper clearances." I raised mine. "And clean audits." For the first time all week, we laughed. By Monday, the audit results came in. Pass with commendation. 0 discrepancies. The compliance officer added a note praising the internal documentation. That night, David forwarded the final confirmation email to me. No subject line, just 2 words. All clear. I opened it, scanning to the end where the legal counsel had added a projected close date for the acquisition. The number below it made my breath catch. 9 figures. This wasn't just vindication. It was transformation. The man my parents dismissed as a network fixer was about to lead a division integrated into federal defense infrastructure. His work wasn't a hobby. It was the backbone of systems that protected entire regions. I stared at the email, then at him. "Do your parents know?" he asked gently. "No," I said, "but they'll find out soon enough." That night, I updated the whiteboard. Under Intel, I wrote, "Revelation. Target underestimated Fiancé's operational value by multiple orders of magnitude." Then, beneath it, in smaller letters, "Countermeasures. Await contact. Let opposition initiate." Because in tactical doctrine, timing is everything. Let the adversary think they still hold the field. And when they summon you to their chosen ground, walk in with the facts they never saw coming. The call came Thursday morning while I was reviewing readiness metrics with my team. Unknown number DC area code. I stepped out into the hallway before answering. "Elena," my mother began, voice syrupy with diplomacy, "your father and I have been talking. Perhaps things got emotional last week. Let's sit down like adults. Sunday lunch at the Jefferson Terrace, just family." Not an invitation. A summons. The same venue they'd reserved for the canceled engagement party. I kept my tone steady. "Copy that." Back in the office, Morales glanced up. "Everything good, ma'am?" "Looks like Hire wants a debrief," I said dryly. He smirked. "Need backup?" I almost smiled. "Negative. This one's off post." Sunday arrived crisp and cloudless, the kind of false calm that precedes a briefing you already know will go sideways. David adjusted his tie, glanced at me. "You sure about this?" "Absolutely. If you want to end a rumor, you don't hide. You show up with the truth." The Jefferson Terrace valet opened the door with rehearsed politeness. Inside, the air carried that faintly expensive chill of climate control set too high. Chandeliers glittered overhead, and somewhere behind the marble columns, a string quartet tuned instruments. We were led to a private alcove. White linens, silver cutlery, a table already set for 4. My parents were waiting, flanked by the aura of practiced composure that had intimidated senators and socialites alike. "Elena," my mother said, rising with an air kiss, "you look composed." "Always, ma'am." My father gestured toward the chairs. "Let's not make this longer than it has to be." The waiter poured water, then disappeared like a ghost. Silence took the table. Weaponized, deliberate. Finally, my father folded his hands. "I hear you've been making alternative arrangements," he began. "That brewery idea? Elena, that's beneath you. Appearances matter." I didn't answer. Let them fill the silence. In interrogation training, silence is the most effective extraction tool. Mother took the handoff. "We're offering an olive branch. If you're willing to relocate the event to a more suitable venue, we'll fund the entire thing. Call it a peace gesture." I stirred my water slowly, watching the reflection ripple. "And the conditions?" "None." She lied smoothly. Then, with the same breath, added, "Well, within reason. Guest list, decor, seating. Things that reflect properly on the family." David sat beside me, posture straight, expression calm. He didn't need to speak. His silence radiated dignity. My father leaned back. "Look, Elena, we want what's best for you. But there's a right way to present yourself. A certain standard." He didn't get to finish, because that's when it started. The faint vibration at first, subtle enough to mistake for a passing truck. Then another. Then dozens. Across the dining room, every patron began reaching into pockets and purses. A wave of phone screens lit up in perfect synchronized timing. Blue light washing over linen and crystal. My own phone buzzed on the table. So did my father's. I tapped the screen. The headline glowed bold. "Helix Defense Systems completes acquisition of Chen Tech. 1-74.8 million deal, strengthens national infrastructure security portfolio under it." A photo of David shaking hands with the defense undersecretary. The room, suddenly aware of the news, shifted. Conversations halted. A man at a nearby table, salt and pepper hair, tailored suit, stood up, recognition dawning. "David Chen," he said, crossing the room. "From Chen Tech. I just read. Congratulations, that's an incredible win." My father's face froze mid-expression, eyes flicking between the stranger, the headline, and the man he'd called unworthy. The executive extended a hand, oblivious to the family meltdown in progress. "This partnership's all over the trade wires. You're the talk of Arlington." David stood politely, returning the handshake. "Appreciate that, sir. We're proud of the work. National resilience, cyber hardening, continuity." The man nodded. "Outstanding. You folks are making history." He departed with a friendly clap on the shoulder. Silence dropped again, only now it wasn't theirs to weaponize. I looked at my father. His complexion had gone pale, as if a vital signal had cut out. The press release still glowed on his phone, digits reflecting off his glasses like coordinates. Mother found her voice first. "David, you never asked," he said simply. Her mouth opened, then closed. My father shifted, grasping for equilibrium. "So, you're—" David's tone remained calm, professional. "CEO, now under federal oversight. Our systems support critical infrastructure. We employ 57 veterans, many more after the merger." The last line wasn't for bragging, it was for contrast. I turned to my parents. "This is what you called unworthy." They said nothing. I didn't need them to. Their silence was confession enough. I set my glass down, aligning it neatly with the table's edge. "You taught me presentation over purpose. In my world, purpose wins." For a long moment, no one moved. Then I pushed my chair back. The soft scrape echoed like a closing file. "Elena," my father started, voice brittle. "This isn't—" "It is," I said, standing. "Exactly what it looks like." I reached for David's hand. He rose with me, calm as ever. Together we turned toward the exit. Mother's voice followed, thin and cracking. "Don't walk away. We can—" I looked back once. "You already did." The chandeliers caught the light as we stepped into the corridor, their brilliance suddenly garish. Outside, sunlight hit my face. Sharp, clean, real. I took a long breath. "Mission accomplished." David squeezed my hand. "Objective met. 0 casualties." I smiled faintly. "Except pride." And for the first time since that first humiliating call, the weight I'd been carrying, the one labeled unworthy, finally dropped clean off my shoulders. Because the truth had spoken in a language even my parents understood. Numbers, contracts, reputation. And for once, I didn't have to raise my voice to win. The drive back from the Jefferson Terrace was silent. Not the wounded kind, but the tactical kind. The silence of after-action review. David's hand rested lightly over mine on the gear shift. Every few seconds, my phone buzzed against the console. Then again and again. A constant digital heartbeat of panic. Missed call. Mother. Text. Call me back immediately. We need to fix this. Another, Elena, please. We didn't know. And then from Vanessa. What did you do? Mom's crying. I stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Not one message said, I'm sorry. Not one admitted what they'd done. Only confusion. Only fear of exposure. It wasn't remorse. It was damage control. I muted the notifications. The hum stopped. For the first time in years, the car was truly quiet. David glanced sideways. You don't have to answer. I know. But the ringing started again, insistent, relentless. It echoed the way drill sergeants bark commands until you act out of reflex. So finally I answered. Alexis. My mother's voice cracked mid-word. The polished cadence was gone. How could you hide something like this from us? Do you have any idea what people are saying? About what? I asked evenly. You could have told me he was that David Chen. The defense contract. The acquisition. She sniffed sharply. Do you know how this makes us look? There it was. The question that defined every Vincent interaction. Not what does this mean, but how does it look? Mom, I said quietly, it looks exactly the way it should. You misjudged someone based on nothing that mattered. Elena, don't be cruel, she pleaded. We were protecting you. The world can be unforgiving. No, I cut in, voice calm but final. You were protecting your reflection, not me. On the other end, her breathing hitched. We can fix this. We'll host a new reception. Press, senators, proper guests. We'll make it right. Right for who? For all of us. For the family. I looked at David. He was watching the road, jaw steady, eyes forward. The look of a man who didn't need to win the argument. He already had. Mom, I said, my voice dropping to that quiet officer tone my soldiers recognized instantly. You can't PR your way out of disrespect. And you can't fix a relationship with an event planner. Elena, wait. I ended the call. The line went dead. For a long time, I just stared at the dark screen, my reflection faint in the glass. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. Clarity feels cold at first. Then it starts to feel like peace. That night, back home, I sat at the kitchen table. My phone lay in front of me like an unexploded device. Do it, David said softly. I opened contacts, tapped father, silence notifications, then mother, Vanessa. Same procedure. Digital firewall established. It wasn't anger. It was standard security, blocking hostile signals until further notice. David slid a mug of coffee toward me. You okay? Yeah. I sipped. Feels strange, like clearing a comms channel after too much static. He smiled. Static never sounded like family anyway. For the first time all week, I laughed. A real one. Short, sharp, freeing. Days passed. The storm raged in their world. I caught glimpses of it through secondhand channels. Society pages whispering about the mystery engineer. Business columns praising a rare meritocratic match. Each headline felt like poetic justice written in plain ink. But I didn't gloat. Soldiers don't celebrate collateral damage. They mark the lesson, then move on. One evening, while reviewing network security reports at my desk, I noticed the framed quote from General Powell taped beside the monitor. Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. I traced the edge of the paper with my thumb. Optimism, yes, but now tempered with precision. Because blind hope was what kept me waiting for approval that was never coming. Strategic optimism meant building something instead. David walked in, sleeves rolled up holding 2 steaming bowls. Chili night. Again? Tradition, he said with a grin. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind earned after chaos. Then he said, you know, when people show you their rules, you can either follow them or write your own. I nodded slowly. I think it's time we write ours. The following weekend, I laced up my boots and ran before dawn. Cold air stung my lungs, pavement steady underfoot. Each stride felt like a line drawn farther away from the Vincent perimeter. 1 more meter of freedom claimed. By the time I reached the overlook above the Potomac, the horizon was bleeding gold. I stopped, hands on hips, breathing hard, and whispered to no one. Mission complete. This wasn't victory in the cinematic sense. There were no medals, no applause. Just the quiet satisfaction of standing on my own coordinates. Later, back home, David was in the yard fixing the porch light. I leaned against the doorway. You realize they'll try again. Emails, letters, maybe an assistant showing up with a gift basket. He looked down from the ladder. Then we hold position. Our perimeter's solid. I smiled. That's why I married you. Married? He teased. We haven't even had the party yet. About that, I said, and a new plan began forming. Something honest, something ours. Not revenge by destruction, but by example. The kind that proves worth through what you build, not what you burn. Because real discipline isn't shouting back. It's holding your ground until the world adjusts its aim. And ours just had. The night of our new celebration, there were no chandeliers, no senators, no whispered introductions rehearsed in marble hallways. Instead, there were twinkling string lights draped between oak beams, the warm scent of barbecue, and the sound of boots scuffing against wooden floors. We chose a veteran-run tavern just outside the city, a place called the Barracks. Its walls were lined with framed patches, faded flags, and photos of soldiers grinning through mud and rain. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. When we arrived, Gunny, the retired Marine who owned the place, met us at the door. He gave me a firm handshake, then looked over at David and said, "You must be the man who survived her inspection protocols." David laughed. Barely. Inside, the room was full of people who mattered, not because of their last names or titles, but because they'd stood beside us when it counted. My squad from Fort Meade, a few fellow officers, the cybersecurity team, and even Maria, Gunny's wife, carrying a tray of homemade cookies. As the music hummed low and conversations filled the air, I stood near the bar watching it all unfold. No spotlights, no speeches, just genuine smiles, relaxed shoulders, and the easy rhythm of belonging. David came up behind me, wrapping an arm gently around my waist. "Looks like Operation Engagement 2.0 was a success." "Copy that," I said with a small grin. For the first time, there was no pressure to prove anything. No mission but peace. No audience but family. The kind built, not assigned. Gunny clinked his glass and cleared his throat. The crowd went quiet instantly, trained by instinct. "They say you can't choose your family," he said in that gravelly voice. But I call bull on that. Family's who shows up when the smoke clears. And tonight, looks like we've got one hell of a unit. The room erupted in cheers. I raised my glass and looked at David. "To chosen families." He touched his glass to mine. "To earned respect." When the night wound down, I stepped outside for air. The autumn wind brushed my face, cool and steady. From inside came bursts of laughter, raw, joyful, alive. I looked up at the night sky. Somewhere beyond that dark canvas was the same constellation I used to stare at from barracks rooftops after long training days. Back then, I thought the stars were fixed, cold, unchanging. But now, I understood something new. You can't move the stars, but you can choose which ones you navigate by. The ones that lead you home aren't always the brightest. They're the ones that show up when you're lost. In that moment, I realized the war I'd been fighting wasn't against my parents. It was against the idea that worth could be inherited instead of earned. That legacy meant control instead of compassion. They had their empire. I had my unit. And when the dust settled, the empire trembled, but the unit stood strong. A few months later, David and I launched the Pathfinder Fund, a small foundation that provided scholarships for kids from military families, kids who dreamed big but lacked the means to break orbit. We named the first grant after my old call sign, Echo 6, because sometimes the quietest voices are the ones worth amplifying. When the acceptance letter went out to our first recipient, a bright 15-year-old who wanted to build satellites, I felt something shift. Not pride, not vengeance, closure. This was the mission all along. Not to outshine anyone, but to ensure no one else would ever be told they weren't worthy. Now, when I look back, I don't see enemies. I see training. Every slight, every dismissal, every cold command. They all hardened the steel. Respect, I learned, isn't granted by bloodlines or brands. It's forged in restraint, tested in silence, and proven when you choose integrity over impulse. And if you hold your line long enough, the world eventually salutes. If you've ever watched someone get underestimated, or lived through it yourself, what did you learn about strength? Share your story in the comments. And if this one resonated, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next mission. Because here on Soldier Revenge, every day, we tell stories of quiet professionals who stood tall when it mattered, and let respect do the talking.